we're going to be talking about the benefit of applying early, because I see a lot of questions in the chat about, hey, how much benefit do I really get from applying ED or SCEA or REA? So now I'm sure most of you have seen these statistics before, but in case you hadn't, if you look at the raw sort of data without any context, right, what often appears to be the case is that there's a huge advantage to applying during the early round versus the regular round. And that's true at sort of private selective colleges like NYU or Barnard. It's true at less selective colleges like Reed College or Bryant University or TCU. It's also true at the Ivy League schools, of course, like Harvard, Princeton, and UPenn, at least on paper. But I'm here to tell you that at least part of what you're seeing on this page right here is a statistical mirage, right? Which is that early acceptance rates are much higher on paper, but the applicant pool that's applying during the early round is different than the applicant pool that's applying during the regular round, right? So what you're seeing there is one part, obviously, a better chance of admission, and we'll talk about how to think about that better chance of admission from almost from a mathematical perspective. But it's also one part that it's a fundamentally different set of students who are applying during the early round versus during the regular round. Part of that is because the early applicant pool tends to have stronger applications on average. And there are fewer what I call throwaway applications. What are these like throwaway applications? Well, some of it is students who, are sort of pretty much well outside of the academic and overall application profile for a college, who maybe just, take a flyer on applying to Harvard or take a flyer on applying to Cornell or Carnegie Mellon. Another category is that some schools, particularly selective liberal arts colleges will sometimes do this, actually do a lot of what I call advertising, especially in international markets, to get students who otherwise wouldn't have applied to apply so that they can show a lower acceptance rate. And the reason they do this is because their US News ranking is actually affected by their acceptance rate. So as a college, you rank higher if you have a lower acceptance rate, because if you're more selective. And so some colleges will actually encourage applications from, candidates that they probably aren't going to accept, because it helps them lower their acceptance rate on paper. And those applications tend to happen in the regular decision round. The other thing that's affecting the candidate pool during the early round is that legacy students, these are students who have a parent, a grandparent, or another relative who attended that college, either for undergrad or graduate school, or a parent who currently works at that university. Legacy students and recruited athletes who kind of already know in advance, hey, I'm being recruited by the school, so I'm likely to get in. Pretty much all legacy students and recruited athletes tend to apply during the early rounds. And they're almost being judged in a completely separate lane from you as an applicant if you don't have one of those sort of statuses, right? So the overall takeaway you should have from this is that there is still a benefit to applying early, but the benefit is smaller than what those raw statistics imply. So it's not truly a doubling of your chances at NYU, or a near tripling of your chances at Barnard, or a quadrupling of your chances as it appears to be on paper at Princeton. And to understand why that is, really what we have to get into is the fact that the benefit of applying early is all about yield, that concept we talked about in the Q&A a second ago, from a college's perspective. So what a college is trying to do with the early applications is boost its yield rate, okay? So as we talked about a bit earlier, yield is the proportion of accepted students that end up enrolling, right? And so from a college's perspective, the reason they even offer early applications is because they're trying to maximize their yield rate, right? So with that in mind, what you end up seeing is that at schools that have early decision, you are actually getting a pretty meaningful boost in your chances of admission, because ED is binding. If you're accepted, you have to enroll regardless of the other colleges that you apply to. EA, on the other hand, early action, doesn't give you as much of an actual boost, right? If you complete your application early, it's almost a sort of indication of deeper interest in the college because you're doing the work a little bit earlier. But the impact on your chance of admission is actually a lot smaller, and it varies depending on the college that you're looking at.